This is Cairo, Egypt's largest city and its capital. For decades, it's been home to Egyptian rulers and their palaces. The parliament has met in this building for over 150 years, and this public square in the heart of Cairo has been the site of several revolutions. But in 2015, the Egyptian government announced the capital would move about 50 kilometers away to this patch of empty desert, which is quickly shaping up to be the new administrative capital of Egypt. This is where a new presidential palace will go, the new parliament building, and a new public square. Egypt's government, led by President Abdel Fattah El-Sisi, claims this new city will solve a specific problem: Cairo's overpopulation. But the country has a long history of building new cities to decongest Cairo. Many of them sit outside the city today. So why is Cairo's population still considered a ticking time bomb? And what's the real reason behind this new capital?
There's a population counter outside one of the ministries. It's mundane, but it's red flashing lights with these colors is almost kind of always like telling people a little too many of you are here.
This is Mohammed El-Shahed, an architectural historian who studies urban development in Egypt.
And I find this to be quite a dangerous narrative, especially that that's actually not the case.
Egypt's home to more than 100 million people, and about 20% of them live within the boundaries of Greater Cairo. The city has one of the highest population densities in the world, with 153,000 people per square kilometer at its peak. That's higher than New York, London, and Shanghai. What we know as Cairo today was officially founded on the banks of the Nile, in the 10th century as the capital of the Arab Fatimid Caliphate. The city had to be built near the river because the rest of the region was barren desert. Over the next several centuries, each ruler built expansions of Cairo close to the fertile banks. The Ottomans built these areas, and the British added these suburbs during their decades-long occupation of Egypt. In the 1950s, when the British left and Egypt became a republic, Cairo was by far the biggest city. In the 50s, 60s, and 70s, millions of impoverished Egyptians from the countryside moved to Cairo in search of opportunities and better living conditions. But the city that was built haphazardly along the river wasn't equipped to house more people.
The city sort of was already kind of shaped and demarcated, and the green areas around it were left agricultural. And it's those areas that were cheap and close enough to those amenities that allowed then people to step in, since the housing that was available was completely not sufficient.
So farmers started selling small slices of their agricultural land to the migrants.
And a lot of people had to build for themselves with little money, so together, so entire families would grow vertical on a small plot of land.
These were the first informal and technically illegal neighborhoods.
It's informal because it's not, given licenses for construction. It's built outside of the economy that is kind of the official economy. And I think this is actually the result of the fact that the economic system really excluded the majority of the population.
For decades, Egypt's government failed to build affordable housing or invest in public services and infrastructure to support the explosive growth in Cairo's density. And that meant these unplanned and informal neighborhoods continued to get more and more crowded until it became a crisis.
Egypt's capital is bursting at the seams. Cairo's equipped to handle around 3 million. In fact, it's home to 8 million. Housing is the area of desperate need. Many people in Cairo lived in makeshift shacks in the city's center and in much worse conditions in the suburbs.
Today, these informal neighborhoods are home to 60% of Cairo's population. Most of them are inhabited by the poor, but many have evolved into middle-class neighborhoods. Collectively, these are the most crowded areas of Cairo, and Egypt's government under Sisi points to them as the real problem behind Cairo's overcrowding.
I find this to be a very problematic narrative, because then we take a question of, let's say, bad design or bad management from a state perspective, and turn the blame on actually the people who are suffering from the bad design and the bad policies, and say there's just too many of you.
In fact, the government still considers them illegal, referring to them as slums.
From the point of view of the state, that calling an area a slum facilitates its removal.
In 2019, the government announced it would eradicate Cairo's slums by 2030. Many neighborhoods will be redeveloped as affluent housing, while thousands of residents will be forcibly pushed out of their homes and into affordable housing outside the city. But instead of focusing on sufficient affordable housing, they invested billions of dollars in a whole new city elsewhere. And it's not the first time an Egyptian ruler has tried to solve the crisis by starting fresh in the desert.
A building boom is in progress. New apartment blocks have been going up at a greater rate since the start of Nasser's revolution.
The concept of a new city as a solution for Cairo's growing population began in the 1950s. The first attempt was under President Gamal Abdel Nasser, who ordered the construction of a new city called Nasser City. It was also designed to be a new capital at the time. There would be space for government buildings, markets, and a huge new stadium. But there was a big flaw. The plan didn't involve affordable housing for the people in Cairo's most crowded areas.
The need was for a lot of lower class housing, but that wasn't going to be placed in the new capital, right? Like nobody wants to build a shiny new capital and then fill it with low cost housing. So it's kind of a trend that already starts there.
By the 1970s, Egypt had a new leader, Anwar Sadat, who didn't end up moving the capital to Nasser City. But he really leaned into the trend of building desert cities. Starting in 1976, Egypt's government built 8 new cities in the desert around Cairo. Each time they claimed the goal was to alleviate overcrowding. But most included only expensive housing, and barely any featured public transportation, making them inaccessible for anyone without a car. That's why today many of these desert cities are only partially occupied. Most who have moved here are Cairo's middle and upper class residents.
That means that the majority of the population that's squeezed in the little green belt that's now urbanized around an island are kind of X'd out of these developments. So we're looking at a condition that's a result of, I would say, 3 to 4 decades in particular of misguided policy that looks to the outside of the city.
President Sisi is continuing that trend with his new capital. These areas are designed for housing, but mostly for middle and upper class residents.
Those people are not moving in with handouts. They're buying those properties. And so the main target audience is, again, a moneyed class. I think the housing for low-income communities will be included in the capital, but definitely very limited.
All of this land will be used for government buildings, and this section will be a business district featuring this soon-to-be tallest building in Africa. So if this new capital isn't really about solving Cairo's population density crisis, why is the government so determined to build it? In 2011, protests erupted in Egypt over police brutality, and they quickly evolved into widespread calls for the resignation of Egypt's ruler of 30 years, Hosni Mubarak. Demonstrations took place all over Egypt, but the biggest were in Cairo, specifically Tahrir Square. It's been the epicenter of many political demonstrations since the early 20th century, largely because it's so close to Egyptian government buildings, including the parliament. In 2011, millions of people occupied Tahrir Square for 18 days. They set up roadblocks and battled with police. On February 11th, thousands marched from Tahrir Square to the presidential palace, 10 kilometers away, where they ultimately forced Mubarak to step down. The ability to control Tahrir Square and Inner Cairo allowed the protesters to effectively paralyze the government, making their presence and their demands impossible to ignore. Sisi remembers that. He was the head of Egypt's powerful military when he seized power in 2013 on the heels of the revolution. Barely a month after taking power, he commanded his soldiers and police to crack down on protesters who opposed him. The brutal raid killed more than 800 people. Ever since, he's been systematically trying to prevent a revolution that could topple him. His government has shut down political dissents, punished journalists, and hindered free speech. Now, they're redesigning several aspects of Cairo to make the city harder to protest in. They've widened dozens of streets, making it more difficult to erect roadblocks. And they plan to add 40 bridges, which will give the military and police easier access to the city center. Sisi's government also renovated Tahrir Square, adding giant monuments and private security guards, which some experts say will make it harder for large crowds to gather in. Now they're taking the final step, removing the government entirely from Cairo. Just 7 years after announcing the construction of the new capital, government officials are starting to move into these new buildings. Once that's complete, all of Egypt's political power, including Sisi, will be concentrated here, almost 50 kilometers from Cairo, and it will all be under heavy guard. This is the military's sprawling complex nearby. Even though there's a public square called the People's Piazza, It's hard to imagine millions of people making the journey from Cairo to demonstrate here. And that may be the point. This distance, plus the military presence, will allow Sisi to defend his power in case of an uprising. So instead of a capital that offers a solution for the people of Cairo, this city is designed to move the government out of their reach.